things that are extraordinary so that I have a vlog. Not because I'm crazy or because I'm trying to blow anybody else's mind, but because these things happened and are implied. So, number one, we started with the mother tree, Kingston, at the Kingston camping park, and that was a good idea. That tree, there's a whole fun story about how hard it was to get up there, and we only made it with 35 gallons. And I know I carried at least 25 of them, but maybe 20. But anyway, we started with the mother tree. This is I forget what they call it, but some sort of juniper. And she was at least 5 feet in terms of her diameter. There's some shots I have video with the buckets, and you can see there are a lot of buckets in the shot, and then a lot of trunk left over. But huge tree at the base, and then extraordinarily up at least 18, 25 feet. I didn't really try and gauge it. I was so worn out by the climb, carrying the water. All 3 times I went up there, and the 3rd time I had 1 bucket that was half full and a camera in my hand. But I was so worn out by that I didn't really have any interest other than doing the work and going back. But I talk about this thing, the Gatorade effect now, you know, where the coach gets Gatorade thrown on his head, and of course he goes, oh. There's a first blush with trees, which I'm going to equate with that are when the trees are coming, you know, I'm going to droughted places. So they've been hot and dry for a long time. They're in a stressed state. With the mother tree, all we had was enough for the Gatorade effect, 35 gallons. And so some of that was trickling in, which is a good idea, because then the tree is not just hit with something it can't relate to. And some of the water had run around the one side of the trunk. Some of the water had been spilled by each of the 3 of us just trying to get up there after we, you know, climbed Mount Olympus. So there were varying states of like the water being introduced, but the buckets were still kind of half full by the 3rd time I got up there to finish off and take the buckets back down. We surrendered at 35 gallons. And so I poured that water in, and then the first unusual, never experienced before thing happened, which was this giant hissing but white noise sort of sound. She just came alive. The whole thing started swarming. White noise sort of sound. That kind of thing. And I thought there was a jet having trouble overhead, and it sounded real troublesome. It was very intense. So I look up to see where the jet is, like if I'm in danger, or what's going to happen. And it's the limbs above my head at that mother tree. They're all moving independently, and the sound is literally coming out of the canopy of the tree, like Medusa's hair, like. But it wasn't scary once you knew what it was. It was clear that this was the sound this species makes, this non-human being or creature or living thing, whatever you want to call it. But this organism called whatever that tree is, that's the sound it makes when it's de-stressing at that, and it's that mature. But all the limbs are moving independently for 10 seconds. And, you know, it's an eternity. At first, you're looking up going, oh my God. And then, oh my God, you know, wow, that is what I'm seeing. And then I should grab the camera, but I don't want to look away. And then by the time you are feeling your pockets, it's starting to die down, kind of thing. And it took a few moments to even figure out what you were hearing, you know. So I'm face down, I'm watering. And all of a sudden that sound starts. So anyway, that was Sunday afternoon, first watering. And it was so dramatic that I tried to tell a few of the locals about it, but it was too freaky for them to really engage in until after, you know, I'd been around for a few days, because it literally, I just walk in town. Only talked to Catherine on the phone, you know, twice. And never met any of these other people before, so I didn't want to come on too strong with my story about the supernatural. But I told Catherine, and anyway, it happened again Tuesday night. We got the hiss of the second tree, and lesser in total volume or total scale, but it was echoing because I was inside of the forest system on the west end of town, in the foothills of the Gila. And so that was like actually scary for a few moments. And then I remembered or realized or whatever to look up, because it was hopefully the canopy, and it wasn't moving as much. Anyway, it echoed and then it stopped, and that was awesome. That was a really, really exciting experience to have a second time and kind of confirm the first one. And the first one was again from the mother tree, which is massive. This was from the first of two trees side by side that were together maybe the size of the mother tree or something like that. They're huge, but not compared to that town tree at the park. There's a shift in all these plants. I've seen it in, you know, all the different types of waterings 100 different ways. After the second hiss, maybe an hour later, then the entire forest system went into de-stressed state. Because again, you get there and everything is tight and hard and rigid and, you know, crooked and not relaxed, not nurtured, not hydrated. And then when you hit the first important transition, it's like all the stress is just gone. Now you just have standing trees everywhere, you know? And that happened, and they look pretty good. And that happened in a flash after the second hiss. Now what was I going to say? Then there's the winds shift. But to understand the wind shift, you know, there's the story of the dust storm, which we experienced in town and everyone was talking about, because, and long story very short, the winds came in from the east. That doesn't happen. And then adding on to it a little bit, it was very colorful because it was a dust storm that actually made national news. It was the biggest dust storm in 20 years. They used the word haboob as many times as they could in the headline, because that's what a giant dust storm is called somewhere in the Arab-speaking world, is an H-A-boob, haboob. What a funny word, ha-ha, boob. Right, let's put it in headlines again and again, because that's the most important part of the story. But it does help describe the magnitude of that thing. It was really unusual, and I'm 99% sure unexpected. What was fascinating then, that was a first for me, is that the dust rolled in as a color, like a giant sunset, which was wonderful, because it was like, oh look, we finally have real cloud cover. And I had told Gary and Catherine, this is Wednesday night, so I had told them Tuesday night that from my perspective, everything was going great, and that the next thing would be expect extraordinary cloud activity. Because we got tufts Tuesday afternoon before I watered, and the first, you know, little tiny clouds, and that was super huge. They had no reason to be there, and they were very white, very exhausty, just like they implied a steamy kind of thing, something tree-like. I don't know. It's like, that's a really, really good sign. And I'm in the forest. At first it grows like a sunset that won't stop and kind of fills most of the sky. But then, before it fills the entire sky, it starts to change, because there's the finest particulate you've ever seen in your life. It was the most amazing thing. It looked like fog. I'm not sure that it wasn't, except that I never felt moist. I felt the forest pull at it like a tractor beam. So that long pull didn't stop, and it looked like fog, but there was nothing there as it washed over us that I could sense. I just could see foggy stuff everywhere, and that fogginess was definitely a good sign. It was definitely a forest phenomenon from my perspective. That was beneficial to the forest. Let's see. Then The next thing on the dial was what I'm talking about, but I'm going to pause it and go get a local ice cream. Okay, got some amazing fast food and vegetarian, and rolling across the desert. Just talked to my main man, Hefe, a little bit. And I need to finish this log before I move into the next thing and forget to capture some of these incredible things. So I was telling him about it, the dust moving into the forest, and that experience was like, the dust was like someone was pulling silk. And so I had seen in the second tree make the sound, then I saw the system de-stress, and then I saw the system have this overwhelming sunset turn into the green fog that wasn't. That was something unique. Anyway, the point is, I'm not saying that this is some supernatural thing. This is just what happened. And then the scale was enormous because I'm in a giant forest or I'm dealing with giant trees, or both. So, all right. Then the rains that came this morning came from the east instead of the west. The same pattern, like big time. And then they actually came from the Gulf of Mexico and across Mexico up to our site. And beyond through the contiguous forests. And what's remarkable about that is, again, east to New Mexico is really unusual. We just lucked out with that tropical storm, but somehow it was drawn to us. And that leads to claiming that we drew a giant tropical storm across 2 states and maybe 2 countries to our site. But the winds, we have pictures showing how the winds just radically shifted from essentially going up the border of the panhandle between New Mexico and Texas, like a giant zipper in the middle of the 48 states. All of a sudden, they shift with that giant dust storm, and guess where they go? They go straight to Kingston, New Mexico, across West Texas into our forests, out of nowhere, seemingly, because it certainly wasn't, and none of that was expected or forecast, as far as I know. The winds, the da-da-da-da-da-da-da. People got dust storm alerts on their phones about 20 minutes before it arrived or something like that. So truly another giant natural thing that took place that's just an interesting part of this, well, an enormously interesting part of this story to see if it repeats again somewhere else. Okay, I have no idea. I've never monitored the desert, but it is interesting that this cloudburst keeps just pointing west, young man. The one I'm still driving under. There's a break, and now we're kind of back in an interesting, in-between place with these, whoa, rain clouds. And then more, importantly, there's a lot of moisture out here, and I stopped to get the food. There was rain coming, and it's been like that a lot. The towns I passed through have rain, light rain expected in the next few minutes. And that leads to the final thing, which was we had 100% coverage of the lightest particle rainfall ever. And it just kept going and going and going. And just completely and utterly ideal for the limited soil capacity to take water. And that continued for hours. It started around 7 a.m. and it was still going around noon, and then I think it came back around 1, around 2, around 3, that kind of thing. So those are some of the extraordinary things.